Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just replacing the pivot bearings in my own Paris Dakar today. It's a bit glum here and I'm waiting for some parts to arrive. And on top of that, these bushes that were in here replaced the needle roller bearings. They were given to me to trial by John Olive, who has Rally Sport Imports in Australia, also runs the Red Centre side of things. He's an admin on this Airheads BMW Riders site, and he organised for a set of these to be given to me to try on my bike because I do a lot of miles on them, and I found them to be absolutely excellent. I've seen a lot of aftermarket trials on various kinds of things, none of which I've ever been prepared to buy, but these have stood about 80,000 Ks, and when I took them apart there was no real appreciable wear in them. They are greasable, and they are the ones that I was given originally had a brass or sintered bronze type insert in them. The later ones seem to be all steel, although I haven't checked that out thoroughly. That's a rebuildable drive shaft in there. It has a greasable universal at each end, and it has a replaceable push drive in it. I've made up a little jig so I can grease it if I take the bottom end off quite easily. That's a little bit of cleaning solvent that was left from the housing that's just running down there to make that look crap. But anyway, normally I take the swing arm and the drive shaft out when I do this job, but today I'm in a little bit of a hurry and I know everything up there is in pretty good nick, so I just popped the end off it. And I've had about 3 or 4 people in the last couple of weeks ring up or email me about these bushes in the Parlevers. They've been trying them. One fellow in Ireland had a bit of a problem and punched the back out of one because he had it too packed up with grease and then wound it up too tight. So I thought I'd just take a little chance to show you what goes into them. So this is the final drive out of the bike. This is the inside, the inner that pivots. This is where the inside of the bearing or bush goes, and then you've got the pivot pins that with the needle rollers, they've got the actual needle roller bearing on them. In this case they're just a Teflon or some other hard substance coated polished pin that goes inside a very close fitting bush. Now that's these things here. So I've been given a replacement set of them. The ones I have done about 80,000 Ks, and they've gone back now to the manufacturer to measure them and test them and have a look at them, and I've been given these ones to replace them. So I just thought I'd show you what they are for those people who've had some trouble with them, who are playing around with them and can't figure it out. This is the fixed pin. It goes in on the left hand side of the bike. You put it in and you screw it home. It should be Loctited with green Loctite, and you have to use heat to kill that to get them out. So be aware if you go to take the pin out of the left hand side of your bike, don't just use Gorilla Force on it. You could crack the alloy housing. Use heat, evenly heat it up until spit sizzles, and then you can crack the green Loctite and get that pin out. Now the factory one looks a bit different to that because these are actually bushes, not bearings, right? So this is the adjustable side one. As you can see, it's threaded. Now I take the grease out of these bushes when I get them and fit them for people. I don't like the grease that's in there. I use a Penrite Moly Grease EP3, which has molybdenum disulfide in it, and it is very, very good for shock loading. It's actually used in CV joints in cars, and it protects very, very well against shock and sort of shock load forces against bearing surfaces. So I always put that in these particular bushes. Now they're such a tight fit, I've actually cleaned this one out and I've coated it with moly grease, and you can see on the end it's still got it there, but it is a really tight, almost airtight fit. If you put the grease nipple that these come with a little adapter in there and try and push it home with grease on it, it's like a bike pump. It doesn't want to go home at all. So you obviously have to take those out to fit everything and adjust them. Now how they work: this is the actual bush. This later model one appears to be made all out of polished steel, and the other one I had a brass or bronze insert in there, but these are just straight steel by the look of them. And these are the later versions. So after all their trials and tests, this is what they've come out with, and they fit in here on the on the final drive. You can see that doesn't want to fall in there. That's because they're an interference fit, and the final drive has to be heated. I usually put these into the freezer for about 20 minutes before I try to fit them, and heat the housing up, and then they just plop in really nice and easily, and they don't cause any stress to me or the machinery. And then you simply line up your final drive, grease these. This one hasn't been greased with moly grease yet, but because I wanted to be able to get it apart to show you. And then you just screw them home, and when you adjust this particular one here, you screw it in, make sure, wriggle it all around, make sure that it's seated on the left hand side fixed pivot pin, properly seated up nice and tight. Screw the other one home, and you just want it to kiss the back of this bearing, and just maybe the slightest amount of tension on it, not preloading like a bearing at all. You just really want to kiss it, and then just give it the tiniest little nip. Don't fill it with grease before you do it, because you can do like my friend in Ireland did and actually punch the back out of the housing. Because for any of you who've worked in workshops, one of the best things we had in the old days was a Sykes Pick-Event porta power, which was actually packed, double piston pump arrangement packed inside with grease, and that was up to about 12 tonne on the ground, that particular thing. So put them in with just a smear of grease on them, make sure that there's enough on the back. When you squeeze it all home, it should squirt out through the little grease hole. I don't know if I can get this to work, but I'll try. There, see? You push that in and it'll all squeeze out through there. Wipe that excess up. Once you got it all set and adjusted, you just put the nipple back in and just give it the slightest pump of grease. It'll give resistance, but there is a relief in here to allow it to flow out, and mainly really it'll just smear down around here. It will be a very thin coating, and that's why I always use moly grease, and I give them a grease about probably every 10,000 Ks. I just give them a little pump on a small grease gun. You probably wouldn't use a quarter of a teaspoon of grease. In fact, I doubt that you'd use an eighth of a teaspoon of grease, but just to keep the grease in around the pivot and in that bearing housing so that it doesn't grab. The pins are made out of some kind of alloy, very hard alloy actually, and they are coated with some kind of brown coppery looking, possibly Teflon type substance. But all in all, I got 80,000 Ks out of a developmental set. I hear from Paul Rooney and Ray Peake and other guys that they're going very well in the 1100s and 1150s, and certainly I had a great run out of them in my PD. I don't think it would have been time to replace them for quite a long time if I hadn't had to give them back so they could do some tests on them. Anyway, that's just a bit of a knowledge thing. I'll show you when I put it back together, and stay well, ride safely.